grand ballroom of the Hyunwoo Hotel glittered under 1,000 crystal lights, and every powerful figure in Seoul seemed to have crowded into it that night. Politicians adjusted their cufflinks. Business tycoons murmured over champagne. Foreign dignitaries smiled the practiced smiles of people who knew they were being watched. But beneath the polish, everyone in that room understood one thing clearly. The man standing at the front, in his tailored black suit, was not simply a successful businessman. Kang Tae-shin was the most feared man in Korea, and tonight he was getting engaged. Beside him stood Han Seo-rin, elegant in ivory silk, her hand resting lightly on his arm, as if she had waited her entire life for this exact moment, which in truth she had. 6 years she had waited. 6 years of patience, of manipulation, of quiet scheming, all leading to this single night where she would finally become Kang Tae-shin's wife. Seo-rin's father cleared his throat, preparing to deliver the speech that would seal an alliance between two powerful families. The room fell into respectful silence. Then the ballroom doors creaked open. Every head turned. 2 little girls stood in the doorway, small and out of place amid the sea of gowns and tuxedos. Their dresses were matching, but wrinkled and slightly askew, as though they had been dressed in a hurry. One girl's hair had come loose from its ribbon. The other was crying softly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. A security guard moved swiftly toward them, ready to usher the children out before they could embarrass anyone. But before he reached them, Nari, the older twin by 7 minutes, grabbed her sister's hand and pulled her closer, eyes darting around the unfamiliar room with open suspicion. Tae-shin, who had been half listening to Seo-rin's father, found his attention suddenly, inexplicably pulled toward the doorway. Something about the girls unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. His jaw tightened. His breath caught, just slightly, just enough that only he noticed it. Bomi, the younger twin, looked up. She scanned the crowd of unfamiliar adults until her eyes landed on Tae-shin. She stared at him the way children stare when they see something they don't understand, but instinctively recognize. She tugged on her sister's sleeve and whispered, not quietly enough. "Nari," she said, "why does that man look like us?" The words rippled through the nearest guests, like a stone dropped into still water. Tae-shin froze completely. His eyes locked onto the 2 small faces staring back at him, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, the ground beneath him seemed to tilt. The eyes, the eyebrows, the exact set of the jaw. Even the way the older girl tilted her head when she was suspicious. It was a mirror of his own childhood photographs, the ones his mother used to keep before she died. He did not move. He did not speak. Every instinct that had made him one of the most dangerous men in the country abandoned him in that instant, replaced by something he hadn't felt in 6 long years. Fear. Who were these girls? And why did they look exactly like him? 30 minutes earlier, none of this had been set into motion yet. Sasha Williams, 32 years old, had been working the event as an interpreter for a visiting delegation of international business partners. She was good at her job, precise, composed, fluent in 3 languages, able to read a room before anyone in it realized they'd been read. But tonight, something was wrong with her. She had felt it building for days, the exhaustion that wouldn't lift no matter how much she slept, the headaches she kept swallowing pills for, the dizziness she blamed on skipping meals. Her daughters, Nari and Bomi, were upstairs in a hotel suite with Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the family friend who had cared for them since they were babies. During a short break between translation sessions, Sasha called to check on them. Evelyn picked up, and the call went to speaker because the girls were eating dinner nearby, their small voices audible in the background. "I'm fine," Sasha said, though her voice was thin. "I just feel a little dizzy." "Sasha, you need to stop working," Evelyn said firmly. "You've been running yourself into the ground." Sasha laughed weakly, waving off the concern even though no one could see her. "I'll rest after tonight. I promise." Then there was a crash. The phone clattered to the floor, but the call stayed connected. Muffled voices rushed into range, unfamiliar, urgent. Miss? Miss, can you hear me? Someone call the medical team, now. Upstairs, the twins heard it all. Bomi's fork slipped from her hand. Nari shot up from her chair, eyes wide. Mommy! Nari called toward the phone. Mommy, can you hear me? No answer came, only the frantic voices of strangers. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She snatched up her own phone, told the girls to stay exactly where they were, and rushed out of the suite to find hotel security and get to Sasha. But 6-year-olds do not simply stay put when their mother has gone silent on the other end of a phone call, surrounded by panicked strangers. Minutes passed. The girls grew more frightened by the second. Bomi, tears already streaming, insisted they had to find their mother. Nari, trying to be brave for her sister, only knew one fact for certain. Their mother was working downstairs at a big party. So they left the suite. They followed the sound of music drifting up through the hotel corridors, past velvet ropes and elegant guests who didn't seem to notice 2 small girls slipping by. They found a set of grand doors, gold-trimmed and glowing with light from within, and they walked inside, into the wrong ballroom entirely. Back in the present, the entire engagement ceremony had ground to a halt. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Seo Rin's face had gone rigid with humiliation, though she forced her expression to remain composed for the cameras stationed at the back of the room. Tae Shin walked toward the 2 girls, each step measured, deliberate, though his heart was pounding in a way it hadn't in years. He knelt down in front of them, bringing himself to their eye level. For the first time in longer than anyone present could recall, the feared boss of one of Korea's most powerful criminal organizations looked genuinely, visibly shaken. "What are your names?" he asked, his voice softer than anyone in that room had ever heard it. Bomi answered immediately, her tears forgotten in the face of this strange, familiar-looking man. "I'm Bomi. She's Nari." Nari pulled her sister back a step, her small body angling protectively in front of Bomi. She said nothing, only studied him with narrowed, wary eyes. "Where is your father?" Tae Shin asked. The girls exchanged a glance, a silent, twin-language conversation that outsiders could never fully translate. Then Bomi said, plainly, "We don't have one." Something about that answer struck him strangely, a discomfort he couldn't name settling low in his chest. "Where is your mother?" he asked next. Before Bomi could respond, the ballroom doors burst open again, and Mrs. Evelyn rushed in, breathless, scanning the crowd until her eyes landed on the twins, and then on the man kneeling in front of them. She stopped dead in her tracks. Recognition crossed her face, then fear, then something close to fury. Tae Shin noticed all of it. Evelyn crossed the room quickly and pulled both girls into her arms, putting herself between them and Tae Shin, as though he were a threat she'd been dreading for years. "Who is their mother?" Tae Shin asked again, his voice quieter now, more dangerous. Evelyn said nothing. Her silence was its own answer. Seo Rin appeared at his side, her tone icy and controlled. "Tae Shin, they're strangers. Let security handle this." He looked at her. He had not accused the girls of being anything to him. Not yet. Not out loud. And yet Seo Rin's face had gone pale, her hands trembling faintly around the stem of her champagne glass. That was the first crack in the foundation of everything she'd built. In the hotel's private medical room, Sasha slowly regained consciousness. A doctor explained that she had fainted from exhaustion and severe dehydration, that her body had simply given out from days of pushing past its limits. Her first coherent thought was of her daughters. She grabbed for her phone with trembling hands. Missed calls, more than a dozen. She dialed Evelyn immediately, her heart hammering before the call even connected. "Sasha!" Evelyn's voice was tight with panic. "Sasha, I found them, but you need to come now." "Where are they?" Sasha demanded, already swinging her legs off the medical cot. Silence stretched for a beat too long. "The grand ballroom," Evelyn finally said. Sasha's face drained of color. She knew exactly what was happening in that ballroom tonight. It had been splashed across every Korean entertainment outlet for weeks. Kang Tae-shin's engagement to Han Seo-rin. "No," Sasha whispered. Evelyn urged her not to come, told her she was in no condition to move, that she should let Evelyn handle it. But Sasha was already running. IV line ripped from her arm, bare feet slapping against marble floors, every rational thought drowned out by a single, desperate need to reach her children before it was too late. Back in the ballroom, Tae-shin continued his quiet interrogation of Mrs. Evelyn, who refused to break. Nari, growing tired of the tension, finally spoke. "We were looking for our mommy," she said. Tae-shin turned to her immediately. "What's her name?" Nari clamped her mouth shut, glancing warily at Evelyn, as if seeking permission she wasn't going to get. But Bomi, still trusting, still unaware of the weight her words would carry, answered without hesitation. "Sasha Williams." The room seemed to still. Tae-shin went completely rigid. 6 years. 6 years since he had last allowed himself to say that name aloud, since he had banished it from his own vocabulary, the way a person avoids touching a wound that is never properly healed. Behind him, Seo-rin's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble floor. Tae-shin turned slowly toward her, something cold sharpening in his gaze. "Why did you react like that?" Before Seo-rin could formulate a response, the ballroom's main doors opened once more. Sasha stood in the entrance, pale, breathless, her hospital gown barely concealed beneath a coat someone had thrown over her shoulders. Every eye in the room turned toward her, but she saw only 2 things. Her daughters, safe, standing near the front of the room, and the man kneeling beside them. Tae-shin saw her. Sasha saw him. Then her gaze dropped to the twin standing at his side, and something in her expression shattered. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Tae-shin's eyes moved from Sasha to the girls, then back to Sasha again, and understanding began to dawn on his face. Not the full truth yet, but enough. Enough to make his knees feel unsteady for the first time in his adult life. "How old are they?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sasha said nothing. Her throat had closed around any words she might have offered. "Sasha," his voice cracked slightly around her name. "How old are they?" It was Nari who answered, small and matter-of-fact, unaware of the earthquake her words were about to trigger. "We're 6. 6 years. 6 years since Tae-shin had last stood in the same room as Sasha Williams. 6 years since he had told her, in the cruelest words he had ever spoken to another human being, that he wanted nothing to do with the child she carried. The pieces slammed into place all at once, and Kang Tae-shin, a man who had never once shown weakness in front of his enemies, felt his entire world crack open in front of 300 wedding guests. 6 years earlier, Sasha had not been afraid of him. She had been the only person who dared to challenge his silences, who laughed when he tried to intimidate her, who walked into his private office without knocking because she refused to treat him like the untouchable figure everyone else did. And Tae-shin, against every instinct that had kept him alive in his brutal world, had fallen in love with her. He had begun making plans no one else knew about, plans to leave the empire his uncle had built around him, to disappear somewhere with Sasha, where his name meant nothing and his hands could finally be clean. Then one night, everything collapsed. A major operation was ambushed. 3 of his men were killed. And the evidence, bank transfers, intercepted messages, a damning audio recording, all pointed to one person, Sasha. He confronted her that same night, his voice cold, his eyes colder. She denied it immediately, desperately, telling him it was a setup, that she would never betray him, that he had to believe her. Instead of believing her, Tae-shin had accused her of something worse. "I'm pregnant," she had told him then, tears streaming down her face, one hand pressed to her stomach as if she could shield the truth inside her from his fury. He hadn't softened. If anything, his suspicion had hardened further. He accused her of using a child that might not even exist. He'd spat at her, to manipulate him, to save herself from the consequences of her betrayal. Sasha had begged him to trust her, to look past the evidence and simply believe in what they had built together. He hadn't. If that child exists, he had told her, each word a blade. I pray it never learns what kind of woman its mother is. Those words had followed Sasha across an ocean. They had haunted her through every sleepless night of her pregnancy, through 2 lonely deliveries 7 minutes apart, through 6 years of raising twin daughters alone in a country far from the man who had fathered them. She left Korea the next morning and never looked back, until tonight. Back in the present, Tae-shin demanded a private conversation with Sasha. She refused, gathering both girls close and attempting to leave the ballroom entirely, desperate to escape the hundreds of eyes now fixed on her family. Tae-shin stepped into her path, blocking the exit. Immediately, Nari moved. She stepped between her mother and this stranger, small shoulders squared, chin lifted in open defiance. "Don't make mommy cry," she said, her voice steady despite her age. Tae-shin stared down at her, stunned into silence. A 6-year-old girl, protecting her mother from a man 300 guests were too terrified to even look at directly. "Move," Sasha said quietly, her voice trembling with barely restrained emotion. Seo-rin, sensing the entire evening slipping irreversibly away from her, grabbed Tae-shin's arm. "The cameras are watching. My father is furious. Get back on that stage." Tae-shin turned to look at her, really look at her, and something in his expression had already begun to change. Then his gaze drifted to the engagement ring, waiting on the stage behind them, glinting under the chandelier lights. Then to Sasha. Then to the 2 small faces, staring up at him with a mixture of fear and unmistakable resemblance. He walked to the stage, removed the ring from its velvet display, and set it down on the nearest table with a soft, final click. "The engagement is over," he announced to the stunned room. Chaos erupted instantly. Guests gasped. Seo-rin's father surged forward, demanding an explanation. Seo-rin herself, humiliated beyond anything she had ever experienced, crossed the distance between them and slapped Tae-shin across the face with all the force her fury could muster. He didn't flinch. Sasha didn't stay to watch any of it unfold. She scooped both girls close and left the ballroom as quickly as her weakened body would allow, Mrs. Evelyn hurrying close behind. Tae-shin watched them go. Then he turned to his most trusted lieutenant, standing near the exit, and gave a single, quiet order. "Find out everything, where she's been for 6 years, and find out exactly when those girls were born." By the next morning, the report was sitting on his desk. Nari and Bomi Williams, born 7 months after Sasha Williams left Korea. Twins. Father listed as unknown on both birth certificates. Tae-shin stared at the documents for a long time before he could bring himself to turn the page. Photographs followed. The girls as newborns, wrapped in hospital blankets. Their first birthdays, a cake with 2 candles. Their first day of school, matching backpacks, gap-toothed smiles. 6 years of life he had known nothing about. 6 years he could never reclaim. He went to Sasha's temporary apartment that same afternoon. She opened the door only far enough to see who it was, then tried to close it immediately. He caught it with his hand. "Are they mine?" he asked, his voice raw in a way that startled even him. "You lost the right to ask me that 6 years ago," Sasha said, her eyes glistening with tears. She refused to let fall in front of him. "I need the truth," he said. "Please." Something in his voice, a crack of genuine desperation she had never once heard from him, not even in their most intimate moments together, made her pause. She stared at him for a long moment, weighing 6 years of pain against the man standing in front of her now. Finally, quietly, she said, "Yes." For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Kang Tae-shin had absolutely no words. He stood in her doorway, silent, his composure, the very thing that made him so feared, so untouchable, completely gone. Sasha watched the realization hit him in waves, watched the man who had once destroyed her without a second glance, now stand utterly wrecked by 2 words. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally managed. Sasha let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "I did tell you. How many times was I supposed to tell a man who refused to listen? I told you that night. The night you accused me, I told you I was pregnant. After you threw me out, I kept trying. Then I spent months trying again. I sent you our daughter's ultrasound pictures. I received nothing," he said. "Sasha, I swear to you, I received nothing." "I sent everything," she said, her voice rising now. 6 years of restrained anger finally breaking through. Ultrasound photos, medical reports, letters, Tae-shin, photographs after they were born. I sent them for 2 years before I finally gave up. "I never got any of it," he insisted. "I would have come. I would have—" "Stop," she said, cutting him off before he could finish a sentence that would only make this harder to bear. "You told me you wanted nothing to do with a child you thought might not even exist. Do you know what that did to me? Do you have any idea?" Mrs. Evelyn appeared in the doorway behind Sasha, having overheard the exchange. Without a word, she disappeared briefly and returned carrying a worn cardboard box, setting it down on the table between them. Inside were copies of every letter Sasha had ever sent. Dozens of them, addressed to a private residence Tae-shin recognized immediately. Only a handful of people in the entire world had ever known that address. His stomach turned to ice. He picked up one letter at random, his hands unsteady as he unfolded it. Sasha's handwriting, careful and controlled despite what must have been overwhelming pain, filled the page. "I am not asking you to love me again," it read near the bottom. "I am only asking you not to punish your daughters for hating me." Tae-shin could not finish reading it. He set the letter down, his throat tight, his hands trembling in a way that would have terrified any of his enemies had they seen it. Someone had intercepted every single one of these letters. Someone had made absolutely certain he never learned the truth about his own children. The betrayal, he now understood, had never truly ended 6 years ago. It had continued, silently, methodically, for every single day since. Over the following days, Tae-shin tried to insert himself into his daughters' lives, operating under the assumption that the truth of his paternity granted him automatic access to them. Sasha shut that down immediately and without room for negotiation. "Being their biological father does not make you their father," she told him coldly, standing firm in the doorway of Evelyn's apartment, where she and the girls were now staying. "You don't get to just walk in after 6 years and claim a place you never earned." Bomi, ever curious, seemed genuinely intrigued by this strange man who kept appearing. She asked him directly one afternoon why he looked so much like her and her sister, tilting her head with open fascination rather than fear. Nari remained hostile. She had noticed, over the years, the way her mother sometimes cried quietly over an old photograph tucked away in a drawer, a photograph Nari had once glimpsed but never fully understood. Until now. One evening, when Sasha had stepped out briefly, Tae-shin found himself alone with Nari for the first time. She regarded him with the same suspicious expression she'd worn the night they met. "Are you the man who made Mommy cry?" she asked bluntly. He could not bring himself to lie to her. "Yes." "Then I don't like you," Nari said simply, and walked away. The words devastated him far more than any threat, any betrayal, any violence he had ever faced in his life. Not because she hated him, but because he understood, with total clarity, that she had every right to. Meanwhile, Seo Rin, reeling from the collapse of 6 years of careful planning, confronted Tae-shin privately at his office. She claimed, with practiced indignation, that Sasha had orchestrated the entire ballroom scene deliberately, that she had brought the twins there specifically to sabotage the engagement. "She should have just stayed gone," Seo-rin snapped, her composure finally cracking, like she promised she would 6 years ago. Tae-shin went very still. Sasha had never made any such promise to him. No one had ever discussed her leaving in those terms, not to him, not in any conversation he had been part of. "How do you know that?" he asked quietly. Seo-rin's face paled, but she recovered quickly, deflecting with practiced ease. Tae-shin said nothing further, but the seed of suspicion had been planted, and he began quietly investigating the woman he had almost married. What he found chilled him. Seo-rin had met with Sasha privately, just days before Sasha left Korea 6 years earlier. In that meeting, Seo-rin had told her, with cold precision, that Tae-shin already knew about the pregnancy and wanted absolutely nothing to do with either Sasha or the child. Sasha had believed her instantly because Tae-shin had already said something devastatingly similar to her face just days before. Seo-rin had also been the one intercepting Sasha's early letters, ensuring none of them ever reached their intended destination. But as Tae-shin dug deeper, he realized Seo-rin had not orchestrated this alone. Someone with far greater resources, far greater reach, had been pulling strings from the shadows all along. The trail led, inevitably and painfully, to his own uncle. Kang Do-hwan had raised Tae-shin since childhood, following the deaths of his parents. He had built the empire Tae-shin now controlled, had trained him, molded him, shaped him into the man he'd become. And 6 years ago, when Tae-shin had begun quietly planning to walk away from all of it, for a woman named Sasha Williams, Do-hwan had made a decision. He fabricated the evidence against her. Every bank transfer, every intercepted message, every damning recording, all carefully constructed lies designed to destroy the one relationship capable of pulling Tae-shin out of the life Do-hwan had built for him. Seo-rin, driven by her own jealousy and ambition, had been more than willing to help maintain the deception once it was in motion. After Sasha fled the country, Do-hwan had personally ensured that every letter she sent was intercepted and destroyed before it ever reached Tae-shin's hands. Every photograph, every plea, all of it, gone, buried by a man Tae-shin had trusted with his entire life. Tae-shin confronted him directly, standing in the same private office where his uncle had trained him since he was a teenager. Do-hwan did not deny a single word of it. He didn't even attempt to soften the truth with excuses. "I saved you from becoming weak," he said instead, his voice utterly without remorse. "No," Tae-shin replied, his voice shaking with a fury more dangerous than anything his uncle had ever witnessed from him. "You stole 6 years of my daughter's lives. You stole 6 years of mine." But in the days that followed, Tae-shin forced himself to confront something even harder than his uncle's betrayal. However carefully Do-hwan had constructed the lies, however skillfully Seo-rin had maintained them, Tae-shin was the one who had looked into Sasha's eyes 6 years ago and chosen suspicion over trust. He was the one who had spoken those unforgivable words to a pregnant woman, begging him to believe her. The conspiracy had made the betrayal possible, but he alone had chosen to believe it. In the weeks that followed, Tae-shin systematically dismantled everything his uncle had built around him. He severed the alliance with Seo-rin's family entirely, ending any political or financial ties that remained. And then, in a decision that shocked everyone who had ever known him, he began the long, dangerous process of walking away from the criminal empire itself. Not because he believed it would win Sasha back, not because he expected forgiveness of any kind, but because he had finally understood something with total clarity. His daughters could never safely have a father who lived the way he did. Months passed. Tae-shin did not attempt to force his way back into Sasha's life, nor did he try to buy his daughter's affection with grand gestures. He didn't arrive with extravagant gifts or promises of mansions and private tutors. Instead, he started small, patient, humble. In a way no one who had known him before would have recognized. He attended Bomi's school performance, sitting quietly in the very back row so as not to draw attention, watching his daughter sing off-key with the kind of pride he had never known he was capable of feeling. He waited outside during Nari's doctor's appointment because she made it clear, in no uncertain terms, that she did not want him inside the room. He learned, slowly and carefully, the small details that made up his daughter's lives. He learned that Bomi talked incessantly when she was nervous, filling silences with a stream of chatter that never quite stopped. He learned that Nari pretended not to be afraid of thunderstorms, even though she flinched at every crack of thunder and quietly counted the seconds between flashes of lightning. Bomi warmed to him gradually, her natural curiosity winning out over any lingering wariness. She began greeting him with genuine enthusiasm, telling him about her day in exhausting detail, asking him questions about everything from why the sky was blue to whether he liked pizza more than kimchi. Nari remained guarded far longer. One evening, as Tai Shin walked the girls home from a rare outing Sasha had reluctantly permitted, Nari finally spoke to him directly, her voice quiet but steady. "Are you going to disappear?" she asked. Tai Shin knelt down to meet her eyes, the same way he had that first night in the ballroom. "No," he said simply. "How do I know that?" Nari pressed, her voice trembling slightly despite her attempt to sound tough. "You could just leave. Grown-ups do that." Tai Shin considered the question carefully, unwilling to offer her an easy answer. She wouldn't believe anyway. "You don't know," he admitted honestly. "Not for certain. So I'll just keep coming back, every single day, until you do." Something shifted in Nari's expression in that moment. Not full trust, not yet, but the smallest crack in the wall she had built around herself. Weeks later, on an ordinary afternoon, Tai Shin was walking the twins home from school, as had become their routine. Bomi chattered on endlessly about a classmate who had brought a pet turtle for show and tell, while Nari walked slightly ahead, pretending, as she always did, not to be listening. Without warning, a motorcycle sped past, far too close to the sidewalk, its engine roaring. Tai Shin's instincts took over instantly. He pulled both girls back against his side in a single motion, shielding them until the danger passed. Once the street fell quiet again, Bomi burst into surprised laughter, more thrilled than frightened by the sudden excitement. Nari, embarrassed at having flinched into her father's side, quickly pulled away and straightened her backpack, refusing to meet his eyes. They continued walking. A block later, Nari suddenly stopped, patting her shoulders as if searching for something. "I forgot my bag," she said, already turning back toward the school. Without thinking, without a single moment of hesitation, she called out, "Appa, wait." Tai Shin stopped walking entirely. The word hung in the air between them. Appa. Father. A word Nari had never once used in his presence, a word he had never dared to hope he might hear from her. Everything around him seemed to fade into silence. Nari, realizing what she had just said, froze. Her cheeks flushed red, and she quickly looked away, mumbling, "I forgot my bag," again, as though repeating the mundane fact might somehow erase the word that had slipped out before it. Tai Shin felt his eyes fill with tears, but he refused to embarrass her by acknowledging it directly. "I'll get it," he said gently, his voice steady despite everything churning inside him. He turned to walk back toward the school. That was when he saw Sasha standing a few feet away, having arrived early to walk the girls home herself. She had heard everything. Their eyes met across the short distance, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Sasha walked toward him, slowly, deliberately. Tai Shin did not ask if she forgave him. He had learned, finally, after everything, not to ask for things he had not yet earned. "They're having dinner at 7, Sasha said quietly, her voice carrying none of the coldness it once had, though it wasn't warm either. Simply honest. Tae Shin looked at her, waiting. "You can come," she added, "if you want." It was not forgiveness. It was not the reunion he might have once dreamed of during his darkest, most regretful nights. But it was a door that was, for the first time in 6 long years, no longer completely closed. Tae Shin looked past her toward his daughters, waiting for him at the end of the street, Bomi already waving impatiently for him to hurry. 6 years ago, he had chosen suspicion over love, and it had cost him everything that mattered. This time, he did not hesitate. He followed them home. If this story moved you, if you felt Tae Shin's regret, Sasha's strength, and those 2 little girls fighting to protect their mother, don't scroll past without hitting that like button. Drop a comment below and tell us, could you ever forgive someone who took 6 years away from you? And if you want more stories like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss what comes next. See you in the next story.